good morning, and thank you, everyone who's showed up here on an early morning after election night, which I'm sure many people were up, uh, thinking about what this means for their business, looking at the markets, et cetera. So thank you for coming. We'll try to start pretty quickly and make this, I think, pretty interesting. Mike, who I think needs no introduction, but if there's anybody out there who doesn't know him, is the president and founder of Galaxy Digital. He, was formerly the president of Fortress Investment Group. Was also a partner and led many businesses and fixed income and currencies and commodities at Goldman. And I think it's just a kind of a stalwart for our industry. And so, Mike, I want to thank you for being here. For those who don't know me, I'm Rob Hadick. I'm a general partner at a fund called Dragonfly that invests primarily in venture in and around the space. So I guess we'll start with the election, since that's on everybody's mind. I mean, I think the story here, I think, is not just that Donald Trump and the Republicans have had a winning night, but that it was kind of a resounding victory, right? There's likely to be a 312 electoral college votes for Donald Trump, which would be the biggest we've had since 2012 for Barack Obama. He'll be likely to be the first Republican president to win the popular vote since 2004. The Senate looks like it's going to be at least 52-48 in Republican control, maybe slightly more than that. And while the House is still up for grabs, it's also Polymarket has it at about 90% that the House goes to Republicans as well. And we've seen the reaction in the markets with Bitcoin up about 9% or so, altcoins up, maybe double that. We've seen, the dollar gets a little bit stronger, about 1.5%. We've seen the yield curve steepen a little bit with the 10-year, but what is your reaction? Like, how are you feeling this morning?
So step back for a second, and because it's easy to get caught up in market moves for the day. Like, we have been in a regulatory purgatory for 4 years. And so innovation has been stifled. New participants have been slowed down or are still waiting to come in. Like, the big news recently was that Bank of New York was able to custody Bitcoin. And then I went over there and talked to them, and they're like, well, up to $100 million total. I was like, oh, okay. So you were able to experiment. And so the step change, what that is coming, which we haven't really digested yet, is we're going to get a new head of the SEC that's going to be pro-crypto. We're going to get a new head of the FDIC, a new head of the OCC, a Treasury Secretary that gives the direction to allow banks to custody crypto, to allow banks to hold crypto on their balance sheet, or financial institutions. And the moment that happens, more importantly than a market infrastructure bill or a stablecoin bill, more importantly than those things, it allows the traditional financial institutions to start playing. And that brings in the horde of institutional capital. Galaxy was set up to bring in institutions, and we have played a role. We work really hard with the institutions partnership or bringing them in. It's still in the infancy of that real capital. And so that's the big shift. I do think we'll get a good stablecoin bill and we'll get an infrastructure bill. They're not going to come right away, right? You're going to have a very close House, even if I think the Republicans will win it, but it'll be by a couple seats. And so everything will get, the original agenda items, or the first agenda items for the Trump administration, probably are not going to be crypto, but you can know the direction and the energy and the body language. I mean, Howard Lutnick is the head of one of the heads of the transition committee. He owns Cantor Fitzgerald. He's a big Bitcoin bag holder. J.D. Vance likes crypto. Peter Thiel likes crypto. Senator Bill Hagerty, who's being rumored to be somewhere, Treasury, huge champion for us in D.C. And so the people around Trump, RFK, are all crypto people. And Trump has become a crypto person. He launched his own damn coin, And so I think it's hard to underestimate. It's easy to underestimate what a big step change this is. Like, we could not have asked as an industry for a better setup. Now, right, we often get criticized as an industry that's working really hard at technology that doesn't do a lot, right? Bitcoin as a store of value, check the box. Payment systems, especially overseas, growing like weeds, check the box, right? Stable coins and payments. But the rest of crypto, why a lot of us got into it, right? Decentralized rideshare, decentralized ticketing, decentralized finance, really hasn't left the crypto sandbox. And one of my theses is it hasn't because the regulatory environment's made it really challenging for people to take risks there. And so what we need to show the world in the next 4 years is that the decentralized revolution, that innovation of being able to have peer-to-peer transaction in private property amongst all kinds of assets is actually real. I think that'll happen, but if this is a $3 trillion industry or a $15 trillion industry, a lot will depend on, does that innovation actually happen?
That's great. Let me pull on a few threads there. So maybe I'll start with the first piece, which is, so it sounds like you're very bullish on just a much more friendly regulatory state. Trump has been, I think, during the election, he's been very open about wanting to do a number of different things. So he's talked about things like a Bitcoin reserve. He's talked about things like, theoretically, like putting like a crypto investment government government advisory council together. He's talked about things like Ross Albright. He said a lot of things. Historically, he's been someone who's been, and I think this would be the counter, someone who says a lot of things who doesn't necessarily do those things or see that through. Firing Gary Gensler, that seems like low hanging fruit. But beyond that, what else do you think might happen, or he might push for, or do you think it'll go into the back burner now that he's raised a lot of money from crypto?
Listen, I said this. We have an amazing representative in DC who works for us as our lobbyist. And I kept telling him, I was like, dude, if we do our job right, you're not going to have a job in 2 years. Because the industry doesn't need that much. We need what I said we need. We need direction from the president and the Secretary of Treasury to the FDIC, the OCC, and the SEC to be friendly to crypto. We need a stablecoin bill. We need a market structure bill. And then we should all stop going to DC and get on with building an industry. Right? There's not that much more we need out of him. Listen, the Bitcoin reserve, it's an interesting, for us Bitcoiners, it's manna from heaven. If I was the president's advisor, the last thing I would do is call something a Bitcoin reserve. Like, we're the reserve currency of the world. You don't want to tell people that it needs to be backed up by anything other than yourself. Like, that's crazy talk. It's not crazy talk to say we're going to own some Bitcoin on the government's balance sheet to symbolically send a message that we're going to lead this industry, that we're not going to sell the $16 billion that we sold, and we're going to buy a little bit more just because we have, we don't owe gold and silver against the dollar, quite frankly. We owned it as a legacy asset, right? Think about what happened with Luna, right? The moment Terra Luna decided they needed to own Bitcoin to back up their stable coin, people started doing the math and saying, wait a minute, hold on. So I guess the Luna's not good enough to back up the stable coin? And, a month later, you had the run on the bank. And so, again, do we get a Bitcoin reserve or not? My guess is whoever takes over Treasury pivots it to kind of where I just pivoted it to and said, hey, let's buy some Bitcoin as a symbolic gesture. But who knows? There are people that fundamentally think differently than I do on these things. If Michael Saylor was here, he would be screaming, of course we need to buy Bitcoin for the reserve. And, Michael Saylor's been pretty damn right for pretty damn long. And so I don't want to act like I'm Mr. Know-It-All. I just don't think that, listen, that's gravy. It's icing on the cake. The cake is those 5 pillars that are happening, and they're going to happen. And so, listen, 240 members of Congress, the new Congress, according to the crypto PAC, are pro-crypto. That's already a majority of Congress. And so, hats off to Brian Armstrong and his whole crew and everyone who got involved in that. We had there's a lot of people that spent a lot of time in D.C. I've been a Democrat my whole life. I have spent more time with Republicans in the last 4 years than I did in the previous 15, and Democrats. And let's be clear, this needs to be bipartisan, right? We're going to have the House. The Republicans will have the House by 2 or 3 seats, maybe 4, right? They're not going to come close to 60 senators. Maybe they have 54 at most. And so you're going to need Congress. And so we got to be careful that, it's not a Republican good, Democrat bad. The reality was most of the Democratic Party and most of the Republican Party didn't know what crypto was from a hole in their head. And it was dominated by a small group, Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler, who really hijacked that issue. And the Democrats realized too late, and I said this 50 times, I was like, there are more people that own crypto and care about it than own dogs in America. And why Trump became the crypto president is because he's so intuitively smart about politics. He understood the dogs in America. And he's like, all these guys are angry and they've been treated unfairly. I'm going to be their guy, right? He was no great friend to crypto his first term.
You called it a scam in 21.
Yeah.
21, yeah.
Yeah. And so, again, he is politically savvy and he sensed the moment and he sees the moment. And quite frankly, the crypto community can be proud. I mean, you look at Sherrod Brown, that $40 million spent against him and he lost. It's hard to take out the lions of the Senate, right? Like everyone, Ted Cruz. You don't take out the Ted Cruzes and the Sherrod Browns and the Chuck Schumers. You just don't. And so that he got taken out, large part because of crypto.
Is there a specific thing or specific items you're looking for in like a stablecoin legislation or market structure legislation that you think would be more helpful than not?
Listen, I think stablecoin legislation is the most interesting, and it's going to be more interesting, right? This is not inside information. Howard Lutnick is running the transition, and his firm does the buying of treasuries, and I think the custodying of treasuries, or at least organizes it for Tether. So he's got a big relationship with Tether. I'm sure it's quite profitable. Right now, stablecoins are the 15th largest owners of treasuries in the world, right? China owns treasuries, Japan owns treasuries, right? All these big central banks own treasuries. Stablecoins are the 15th largest. I would bet my shoes, and they are very nice shoes, that in 4 years, stablecoins will be a top 5 owner of U.S. treasuries in the world. So if I'm the head of the national security, or if I'm the Treasury Secretary, I would probably want the guy that's running the biggest U.S. dollar stable coin to be an American, not Italian. And so how that gets played out, how that plays out, what stablecoin legislation looks like, and it might be as simple as, hey, you can be a foreign owner, but it's all got to be custodied here. Like there might be some compromises that we all can be comfortable with. But that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. Stable coins are going to be more important every week for the rest of our lives. And that's as clear as me as anything. That's by far the easiest bet to make in crypto is in the next 4 years, payments are going to explode.
It makes sense. You maybe, kind of rolling it back a little bit, you talked about how this needs to be a bipartisan effort in the legislature. How are you positioning, or how would you position a future Democrat or Democratic congressional candidate to embrace this? And how do you think we, as an industry, should be trying to reach across the aisle at a time when I think, a lot of Democrats see the crypto industry as somewhat an adversary?
So, this is, I think, a short-term challenge, but not a real one. Like there were 4 Democrats literally that disliked crypto and everyone else was neutral. Our problem as an industry for 6, 7, 8 years is we didn't spend enough time educating people in DC. And quite frankly, our business wasn't big enough, right? Until 2021, the total size of crypto was a flea on an elephant's ass. And so to go down and sit with a congressman and say, this is really important. And he's like, how important can it be? Your guys are tiny. And so we were only really big enough when we passed the $1 trillion mark to even have a little bit of bandwidth. There are plenty of, Richie Torres knows a lot about crypto and loves it. Jake Auchincloss. I can list 15 Democrats that are well versed and knowledgeable and understand crypto and like it. They are frustrated that they let Elizabeth Warren hijack this issue. That was a deal that Joe Biden made, brokered by Barack Obama with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, to have them drop out of the 2020 election. That she was going to have sway over these very key seats, FDC, FDIC, SEC, all the financial seats. And she did. And for whatever reason, she just didn't like crypto. It made no sense, actually. And I think people learned the lesson that this is a bipartisan technology. It's a technology. It's not a religion. And so I think real quickly you'll see Dems come to the aisle on this stuff, come to the middle on this stuff.
So I think in this room, there's probably a lot of investment managers, and we've talked a lot about politics. How are you, as an investor, positioning yourself relative to not just like Bitcoin, right, but maybe the altcoin market? And what are you looking at outside of maybe Bitcoin as a macro hedge or some sort of like macro instrument, or we're talking about stablecoins as well and how you might invest around that? But how are you looking at the rest of the crypto market?
Well, so I think in the short run, right, this is really good for altcoins, right? I mean, we literally wrestled back and forth and back and forth. Knock on wood, we didn't get a Wells notice, but lots of our competitors did, and we traded in some of the same securities they did, and so you're like, should we move them all offshore? Should we not move them offshore? This idea, if Ethereum's not a security, well, is Solana a security? Is Polkadot a security? But if Ethereum's not, why is Polkadot any different? Like, that opaqueness was so complicated that it stopped people from wanting to participate. And all of a sudden, listen, we're going to get market infrastructure legislation, and it's going to say on a go-forward basis, this is a security and this is a commodity. Like, here are the rules. Everything that's already been launched is going to go in some weird sandbox, and it's going to take years to figure it out. I don't think this new administration will actually care much. And so that sandbox is going to feel liberated. And I think you'll see more people participate, at least in the buying and selling of those things. And so my guess is there's a short-term surge. The complicated thing about crypto, and this is I think maybe my only real insight you should take away, is because there's not a lot of utility for many of these tokens yet, that the value comes from narrative, just like Bitcoin, right? Why Bitcoin is valuable is because it's a social contract between me and him. I say it's valuable, he say it's valuable, therefore it's valuable, right? It's not the technology. We could fork Bitcoin, call it Novo Chain, and it wouldn't be worth that much. Same technology, same amount of coins, same everything, right? And so we always believe, and we still do believe at Galaxy personally, that something like Solana or Ethereum will have enough utility usage that it will both have a utility value and a store of value, and that combined level will be value. But the reality is most of these tokens are still just narrative. And so until we see real applications built on top of them, until we see value accreting to the chain, you can only have so many mini communities that are sustainable. And so what you see is something like Cardano, which had its moment, right? It was the fourth biggest chain or third biggest chain. Now over a 5 or 6 year period, it doesn't go to zero, because there are people that are vested in it and they try to keep the energy going and they make new stories and they try to, but because there's not enough new juice, new uniqueness, it doesn't grow its community, right? Why did Bitcoin keep growing its community? Simple mission, digital gold, right? Larry Fink helped grow the community, right? Fidelity helped grow the community. All of these new participants help grow the community. And so when you're growing that community, the price is going to go up. Like, who's helping grow the Cardano community? I haven't heard. I mean, maybe someone is, but I haven't heard, right? Uh, and so I think altcoins are going to go up, but you really got to be careful to make sure after the first surge of price that there's a reason that community is going to grow.
Are there specific verticals that you are more hopeful will find that utility, whether it's things like AI crypto or DePIN or outside of the stablecoin space, where you're saying, okay, well, this is more likely to bring real utility back to the protocol or the chain itself, and also to reach a broad set of users.
We were talking about this a little backstage, collateral management type stuff, right? There's a huge amount of money that sits idle at financial institutions around the world. And so the protocols or the chain that will move that collateral, if you put it all on a blockchain, it would save immense amounts of money for giant financial institutions. And so the first, I think, scale usage of crypto, of blockchains, is going to be plumbing. I'm a storyteller. I'm not a plumber. But it's really going to be in the plumbing. One of the guys back that has a whole firm that's investing in it. That I think is interesting. Things like blockchain-based ticketing makes so much sense, but we still haven't had it. Ticketmaster, the incumbents are tough, and they're pretty effective, and there's not enough individual angst to collectively take them on. And so, because I would have thought we would have had blockchain-based ticketing 8 years ago. It makes so much sense, right? If tickets are private property, I could give my private property to you and not have to go through the broker. But we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's been I think a lot of us, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room, have been looking for that utility to really come, and for a lot of these projects to get mass market. Some of that has clearly been on the regulatory side, and there's been, as we've seen, actually quite a lot of these entrepreneurs who we think would enter the crypto market otherwise, but have either entered other markets because they were worried about regulation, or have left the country altogether and built applications maybe not for mass market but for specific localities. Have you been positioning Galaxy for maybe investing in Asia or Europe or other parts of the world? And then how do you see that changing now with this election? Do you see it coming back?
Yeah, listen, we have a big European office. We have a medium-sized Asia office. We have a Bahamas office, but the bulk of our people are here. And we have a venture arm that invests in new technologies and helps them. We have an infrastructure arm which does staking as a service and market making. Broadly, we've played with the bigger protocols, not in venture, but in our trading business. And so I think this probably makes it a lot easier not to have to shift everybody, because we've literally had this debate. If the SEC smashes you, how many people can you move to the Bahamas? Should we trade everything out of there versus the U.S.? And so we've kind of walked that fine line. I think this will make it a lot easier to say, hey, we're going to feel comfortable doing business here without, having the feds knock on our door. And so I think it broadly keeps things more here. The innovation, though, often happens abroad. Like, why don't we talk about blockchain-based payments in the U.S.? Because every taxi cab I take, I just do my little Apple Pay, and it works seamlessly. And while there's still interchange paid, I don't notice it, and it feels pretty damn efficient. And so there's no real burning desire I need to pay that guy in a stable coin. But if, I'm living in Africa and I'm trying to send money around, I'm doing Tether on Tron. Who would have thought Tron is one of the most valuable blockchains? But it is. Like, Justin Sun makes a fortune running the nodes on Tron. People use it because it's cheap, it works, it's easy. And so I do think you need to be overseas to see where and remember, the U.S. is 340 million people out of 8 billion. And so, but again, the last thing I would say is there's a whole other piece of stable coins that we haven't gotten to yet, which will be Internet of Things, right? When you think about AI, so computers and machines talking to each other. And I fundamentally believe, because I've talked to a lot of big industrials, that until there's a regulated stablecoin, like in Europe, we're working on a stablecoin with DWS and Flow Trader that will be BaFin regulated. Once there's a regulated stablecoin as opposed to an unregulated stablecoin, I think you'll see big adoption from the big regulated corporates to do Internet of Things and stuff that we haven't seen yet. And so that's the space I think that's probably I'm most optimistic in over the next 2 years.
Are you more optimistic in, it sounds like you're doing a lot around being an issuer, and you're also, I just saw that you're part of the global dollar network that you're doing with the MAS in Singapore. That's been, I think, the focus today has been Tether and Circle accruing a lot of this value. But obviously we saw the bridge Stripe transaction, and it seems a little bit like Stripe is looking to more towards the network side and trying to be that part of the stack. Where are you focused on different parts of the stack, or is it really the issuer side?
We love being a service and liquidity provider for everybody. And so like, you almost can't name a stable coin that we're not engaged in somehow. And it's not that we're completely neutral. I think some things are going to work and some things, might not work. But what makes them work is network effect, right? They're all the same damn technology, with the exception of, listen, Paxos has an amazing stable coin that's regulated in Abu Dhabi that broadly pays interest. So it's like having a treasury bill in your pocket. It's such a brilliant idea, other than the fact that if we had it regulated in the U.S., there would be no banks. Why would you ever leave your money in a bank for very low deposit rate when it really is just a hedge fund with a kind of guarantee from, the government, as opposed to government? And so if every person just had a stable coin with interest, right, then you have a bank in your wallet that's guaranteed that's treasury bills. Like it literally devours the banking system. Well, the problem with that isn't that I love the banks. It's, well, then how do we create credit? And so when you're the Fed, you panic when you see that. You're like, no, I can't crush the banking system, even though it's unbelievably progressive, right? We've got all these people that are underbanked. And most of you guys who are not underbanked don't even recognize when you leave your money in JP Morgan, they pay you 0 or 1 basis point, unless you move it out of your deposit account into some CD. And so that giant arbitrage that financial system has against consumers could go away literally in a snap of the finger. The technology is already there. And so you have to think projects like that will slowly find their way into systems.
All right, so we're about up on time, so maybe one last question. What is your most contrarian projection or take on the crypto market over the next 5 years?
Well, crypto has been a storytelling business. And I think for it to really succeed in the next 5 years, it has to be a plumbing business. And I always tease my team. I was like, guys, if I'm still here in 5 years, you guys suck. Because I'm a storyteller. I understand what's happening and I can put context around it and tell stories. But I really think for us to succeed as an industry, outside of Bitcoin, which I think it's already succeeded, we need to be the back of the TV. We need to be the plumbing that moves things around, that gives people agency. And, I watch the TV, it looks pretty cool. I don't know how it works, right? And so the plumbing and how we rewire the consumer infrastructure and the financial market infrastructure of the country and the world is really the mission. And I think that's going to take a real engineering focus. And so if I'm replaced by a plumber, the industry has succeeded. But I think that's something, I use that as a metaphor. Otherwise, we're going to be still, hey, let me talk about blockchain number 27. And most people can't tell you the difference between, Polkadot and you name the other, Avalanche, and why one's more important than the other. And, these were all stories that people told to get people around them, all usually built by very bright guys, and try to create community and try to get use cases. And so if they don't really get used, they're going to just peter out.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks, guys.